For this video lesson, we're talking about the 4 types of transformations. Our essential question is, what are the 4 types of transformations and how do they change a figure? Please pause the video to copy down the topic and essential question into your header, along with today's date, set your question column and your note column, and resume the video when you're ready to begin. We are going to start with reviewing some vocabulary we've been discussing in class. The first word, transformation, means to change. Congruent means that the object has retained the same shape and the same size, while similar means that the figure has retained the same shape but is now a different size. As we learn about each of the 4 different types of transformations, we're going to be looking at how the shapes change. Are they retaining the same shape? Is the size staying the same, or is the size changing? And being able to notice these changes in the shapes will help us to identify each of the different 4 types of transformations. Let's take a look. Here are the 4 transformations we'll be discussing today: a translation, reflection, rotation, and dilation. Please take a moment, pausing the video, to copy down this table and the 4 shapes we'll be using to look at each type of transformation. Let's start by discussing translations. The SL in translation reminds me that it is describing a slide in any direction. So we can take this triangle here, and if we are going to do a translation, we can slide it to the right, we can slide it up, we can slide it down, and we can even make a diagonal slide. An important thing to notice about the translation is that the figure retains its same shape and its same size. So even if we take a shape and slide it all around, or slide it to a different position, that new shape that is created by that translation is still congruent to the original figure. Let's take a look at reflections. This is another name of a transformation where I use the letter inside the name of the transformation, reflection. I use the FL to remind me that a reflection flips the figure over, and it flips it over a line. So once again, that line could be any direction, much like the translation. So I could have a line that runs vertical and flip it over that vertical line. So if I used a vertical line and performed a reflection of this figure over that vertical line, we would notice that it now is pointing, this arrow is now pointing in the opposite direction, but the size is the same and the shape is the same. So how would we use our vocab words to describe that? Well, we'd say that the figures are congruent because it is the same shape and size, but because it is now facing a different direction, we say the orientation changes. So anytime you do a reflection, the figures will be congruent, but the orientation will be different. Next, let's take a look at rotations. A rotation is simply turning a figure. So picking a point on the plane and turning that figure. We can turn it clockwise or counterclockwise. So let's take a look at what it would be to turn it clockwise. When I turn a figure clockwise or rotate it clockwise, I'm turning it to the right, and I use this point of the lightning bolt as my center of rotation and rotated it clockwise to the right. So what do you think it's going to look like if I rotate it counterclockwise? If you said it would turn left, you're correct. A rotation to the counterclockwise direction using this point on our original lightning bolt, turned it to the left and resulted in this new figure. Just like translations, when we perform a rotation, the figures are congruent and the orientation stays the same. Lastly, let's take a look at dilations. A dilation takes a figure and changes it in size. So we might take this orange original pentagon here, and we could shrink it down and make it smaller, or we could enlarge it to make a bigger version of our original figure. So for as far as describing how dilation changes an object, what vocabulary words do you think we're going to use? Well, if you said that the figures would be similar, then I agree with you. Because a dilation changes the size, it's no longer congruent, but it is still the same shape. So anytime you take a dilation on a figure to change the size while keeping the shape the same, you are creating a similar figure and the orientation is the same. So these are the 4 types of transformations we'll be using and learning more about in this unit. It's important to note that when studying and looking at transformations, or looking at a figure in its original state and its new resulting figure, and we're trying to figure out what transformation may have happened, we want to know that they might have done more than one transformation. You don't have to do them in isolation, so be on the lookout for those types. And in fact, let's get some practice now. Before we end today, I want you to copy in these 2 practice problems and copy them into your journal, and then look for which transformation or multiple transformations were applied to go from the original figure, which is the lighter one, to the new figure, which is the darker shade. And use this space below to record which transformations you identify in each pair of shapes. So please make sure your notes are complete, that you've copied down all of the examples, including these 2 practice ones. And to get full credit for these notes, write a summary using your own words to answer our essential question, which is, what are the 4 types of transformations and how do they change a figure?